Good evening. You've arrived at a quiet place for rest, and tonight there is nothing you need to solve, understand, or remember. This is simply a calm science story, told slowly, meant to fade into the background as you rest, with no need to listen closely or follow every sentence. If your mind drifts, that's perfectly fine. Right now, your body is already doing most of the work on its own. Breathing continues without effort, and the weight of your body is supported by the surface beneath you. There is no instruction to follow and nothing to improve. This video isn't here to guide you somewhere new. It's here to remain steady, predictable, and quiet, the way natural processes tend to be when we stop watching them closely. Everything you'll hear tonight is based on well-established scientific understanding, not theories meant to impress or ideas meant to surprise. Just observations that have been measured, confirmed, and repeated over long periods of time. They're shared softly, without urgency, because nothing here is happening quickly and nothing requires your attention. If at any point you fall asleep, that's expected. And if you wake up later and hear a sentence or two, that's fine as well. The story doesn't rely on sequence or build toward a conclusion. It simply continues at a steady pace. You may notice moments of silence between phrases, and those pauses are intentional, part of the rhythm, giving your nervous system time to settle without being asked to do anything at all. As you rest, you can let your thoughts move at their own speed, with no need to control them. Some may pass quickly, while others linger for a moment before drifting away. For now, all that matters is that you're here, resting, listening if you want to, and not listening if you don't, while the science unfolds quietly in the background, slowly and evenly, just as it always does. While you rest, there's no need to adjust your position unless your body naturally wants to, and if you're already comfortable, you can simply let stillness remain. Breathing is happening on its own, with no need to change it, slow it down, or make it deeper. Each breath arrives and then leaves without effort. The muscles in your face may already be softening, including the small muscles around the eyes, the jaw resting without being held in place, and the tongue settling naturally in the mouth. There's nothing to release deliberately and nothing to relax on command, because your nervous system already knows how to move toward rest when the environment is quiet and predictable. Your shoulders may feel heavy, not pulled downward, just supported, as if gravity is doing what it has always done, evenly and without urgency. Your arms are where they are, with no need for perfect positioning or symmetry, simply present and resting along with the rest of your body. If there's any remaining tension, it doesn't need to disappear and can remain exactly as it is, because the body doesn't require total relaxation in order to rest. It only needs safety and time. Your chest rises at a pace that suits you, and the rhythm may change slightly from moment to moment, which is normal. Breathing adjusts continuously without asking for permission, and lower in the body, the abdomen moves gently with each breath, with no need to hold it in or control it, responding naturally to pressure and release. Your legs are supported by the surface beneath you, their weight already being carried, with nothing to keep upright and nothing to balance. The feet don't need attention, warmth, tingling, or any particular sensation. They can simply exist at the far end of the body, quiet and unremarkable. As these sensations remain steady, the brain begins to notice the lack of demand, with no task, no response required, and no change expected. This is often when mental activity starts to slow, not because it's being forced to, but because there's nothing pressing to react to. Thoughts may still appear as fragments of the day, images, or unfinished sentences, and they don't need to be pushed away or followed. They can pass through the mind the same way sounds pass through a quiet room, present for a moment, and then gone. If your attention drifts away from these words, that's completely fine, because the body doesn't need continuous input and responds just as well to consistency and tone. The voice you're hearing isn't here to guide you somewhere specific. It's here to remain steady, allowing your internal systems to settle at their own pace. There's nowhere else to be and nothing else to prepare for, because the night doesn't require readiness, and you can continue resting exactly as you are, breathing, supported, unchanged, as the body already knows how to do this. As the body remains settled, attention often becomes less focused on specific sensations and more open to a general sense of steadiness, with no clear boundary between being awake and resting deeply, only a gradual shift that happens quietly and without announcement. In the natural world, many processes move this way, not in sudden steps, but through slow transitions that are easy to overlook. As temperature changes gradually across the evening, light fades without a clear moment when day becomes night, and even sound softens over time as activity decreases and distances feel larger. These changes don't require coordination or respond to observation. They unfold whether or not anyone is paying attention. The body is familiar with this rhythm, having evolved within environments shaped by repetition and slow variation rather than constant alertness, which is why predictable patterns tend to feel safe, carrying no urgency and demanding no quick reaction. In physics, many systems behave in a similar way, with large-scale processes moving slowly under consistent forces rather than sudden impulses, and once set in motion, they continue along stable paths for long periods of time, sometimes for years, and sometimes far longer. These motions don't need correction or supervision. They persist simply because the conditions around them remain steady. When systems like this are described scientifically, they're often explained using simple principles repeated across many situations. And while the details can become complex, the underlying ideas are usually straightforward. This simplicity is part of what makes them calming to listen to, with nothing hidden behind the description and no surprise waiting to appear, only continuity. In the background of daily life, countless slow processes are always underway, forming a quiet foundation beneath faster events without interrupting or competing for attention. The mind doesn't need to track them closely, only to recognize that they're there, stable, ongoing, and unaffected by momentary changes. This kind of awareness doesn't sharpen focus, it softens it. There's no need to imagine specific scenes or hold detailed images, and if images appear on their own, they can pass naturally. What matters more is the sense of gradual movement, the feeling of things progressing at a pace that doesn't rush toward an outcome. In this state, time can begin to feel less structured, with no need to count minutes or follow a sequence. The voice continues, steady and even, not to hold attention, but to provide a constant reference point, something consistent enough that the mind doesn't need to stay alert. This is often when thinking becomes less verbal and less linear, not because it stops entirely, but because it no longer needs to organize itself around tasks or decisions. Rest doesn't arrive all at once. It settles in layers, first in the body, then in the breath, and gradually in the spaces between thoughts. You don't need to notice when that happens or mark the transition, because the process continues on its own, and the quiet science story continues too, moving at the same unhurried pace as the natural systems it describes. Among the many slow and steady processes that shape the natural world, there is one object that has remained quietly present for as long as humans have looked up at the night sky, appearing, disappearing, and returning in a predictable rhythm without announcing itself or changing suddenly. The Moon is Earth's only natural satellite, and it has moved alongside our planet for billions of years, following a stable orbital path shaped by gravity and time. From Earth, the Moon often seems close and familiar, almost unchanged from night to night, even though its motion is constant whether or not it's noticeable. It travels around Earth along an orbit that remains remarkably regular, a motion that requires no guidance or correction because the physical conditions supporting it stay in balance. Gravity provides that balance, not as a dramatic pull, but as a continuous interaction between two bodies with mass. The Moon does not circle Earth because it is being pulled in the everyday sense of the word. Instead, it follows a curved path through space, shaped by the combination of its forward motion and Earth's gravitational influence. This is a pattern seen throughout the universe, where objects move along paths that feel natural to the forces acting on them, and once established, these paths can remain stable for extraordinarily long periods of time. The Moon's distance from Earth is large yet consistent, remaining on average hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, without dramatic fluctuation from one orbit to the next. Because of this stability, its presence becomes easy to take for granted, feeling permanent and reliable. Its surface reflects sunlight, creating the phases that slowly change over the course of each month, not at random, but according to a precise geometry involving the positions of the Sun, Earth, and Moon. As the Moon moves along its orbit, different portions of its sunlit side become visible from Earth, even though the Moon itself does not change shape, only the angle from which it is seen. This pattern repeats predictably without deviation, moving through new moon, waxing phases, full moon, and waning phases, before completing the cycle and beginning again. There is no pause between cycles and no moment when the process needs to reset. It simply continues, one orbit following the next. For much of human history, these changes were observed long before they were explained, with calendars built around them and time measured by their repetition. Today, the scientific explanation is well understood, with observations matching models and models matching what is measured. Nothing about the Moon's motion requires speculation or mystery, as it is a physical object moving according to physical laws in an environment governed by consistent forces. The Moon does not act with intention, respond to events on Earth, or change its behavior based on observation. It remains present because the conditions that place it there remain unchanged. Over very long periods of time, gradual changes do occur, but they happen so slowly that they are invisible from one generation to the next. And on a human timescale, the Moon's motion feels fixed and its rhythm dependable. That dependability is part of what makes it easy to listen to, even when the details are not being actively followed, as the brain tends to relax when patterns repeat without surprise. Outcomes are predictable, and nothing unexpected is required. The Moon offers that kind of pattern, moving, returning, and remaining without effort or attention, simply continuing quietly, as it has for longer than any living memory. While in the background of the night, that steady presence remains, not demanding awareness or interpretation, just following its path, one slow orbit at a time. To understand why the Moon's motion remains so steady, it helps to look at one of the simplest forces described in physics: gravity, which is not rare or unusual, but present wherever there is mass. Every object with mass exerts a gravitational influence on every other object with mass, and this influence does not turn on or off. It is always there, even when it is extremely weak. Between small objects, gravity is barely noticeable, while between large objects, its effects become easier to observe. Yet the underlying principle remains the same in every case. Gravity does not push or pull in the way muscles pull on a rope. Instead, it describes how objects influence the space around them, shaping the paths that other objects follow. In everyday life, gravity is most noticeable as the force that keeps objects resting on the ground, giving weight to the body and providing a consistent downward direction. And because it is always present, it rarely draws attention to itself. In space, gravity works in the same way, even though its effects look different, as objects are not falling straight downward, but following curved paths that result from gravity acting continuously as they move forward. This is how orbits form. An orbit is not a state of suspension or stillness, but motion guided by a constant force. The Moon moves forward through space, while Earth's gravity continuously alters its direction, bending its path inward, and the result is a smooth, repeating curve. This motion does not require energy to be added each time the Moon completes an orbit. It continues because there is nothing removing energy from the system at a significant rate, and as long as the conditions remain stable, the motion remains stable as well. Gravity becomes weaker with distance, decreasing gradually rather than abruptly as objects move farther apart. And because of this, the Moon's distance from Earth plays an important role in shaping its orbit, close enough to remain bound and far enough to move freely along its path. This balance has persisted for an extremely long time. Gravity does not choose outcomes or favor one direction over another. It simply describes how mass and motion interact. When scientists describe gravitational systems, they do so using models that have been tested repeatedly, allowing predictions to be made with remarkable accuracy. So the Moon's position can be calculated far into the future, as well as into the past. These calculations match observation and do not require adjustment based on belief or interpretation. This reliability is part of what makes gravity feel unremarkable, as it behaves the same way everywhere it has been measured, does not fluctuate without cause, and does not surprise. In large systems, gravity often produces slow, predictable patterns rather than sudden changes, especially when objects are already moving along established paths. Once an orbit is formed, it tends to persist, with small variations occurring over very long periods of time and accumulating gradually rather than all at once. On the time scale of a single night, gravity feels constant, unchanging, and unconcerned with what is happening on the surface of the planet. The body responds well to this kind of consistency, as the nervous system tends to settle when external forces behave in predictable ways, with no need to monitor them or anticipate disruption. Gravity continues doing what it has always done, quietly shaping motion and maintaining structure. And because it operates continuously without interruption, it provides a steady foundation for the slow processes that follow. Processes that unfold not in moments, but across hours, days, and entire cycles of time. When gravity acts across large systems, its effects are not concentrated at a single point, but spread gradually, shaping motion over wide areas. And the ocean responds to gravity in this way. Tides are not events or actions. They are the natural outcome of gravitational influence acting on a fluid body over time. Because water can move freely across Earth's surface, It responds more noticeably to subtle forces than solid ground does. The moon's gravity affects every part of Earth, but its influence is slightly stronger on the side of the planet closer to the moon and slightly weaker on the side farther away. This difference is small, yet across the vast volume of the oceans, it becomes measurable. As a result, water on the side of Earth facing the moon experiences a gentle tendency to move outward, while at the same time, water on the opposite side experiences a similar outward tendency, shaped by the overall motion of the Earth-Moon system. These two regions of slightly elevated water are known as tidal bulges, and they are not walls of water or waves moving across the ocean, but gradual redistributions of mass. Between these regions, water levels are slightly lower, and as Earth rotates beneath the tidal bulges, coastlines move through areas of higher and lower water level. This rotation creates the familiar pattern of rising and falling tides observed in many parts of the world, often resulting in 2 high tides and 2 low tides over the course of a day. The timing and height of tides vary depending on local geography, ocean basin shape, and depth. The moon is the primary contributor to tidal forces on Earth, though the sun also contributes despite being much farther away. Because the sun is so massive, its gravitational influence is significant, but due to its distance, its effect on tides is smaller than that of the moon. When the sun, Earth, and moon align, their gravitational influences combine, producing slightly higher high tides and slightly lower low tides, known as spring tides. When the sun and moon are at right angles relative to Earth, their influences partially offset each other, producing smaller differences between high and low tides, known as neap tides. These variations are regular and follow predictable cycles tied to the moon's orbit and Earth's rotation. There is no decision involved in this process, as the ocean does not respond or react. It simply follows the physical conditions acting upon it. Water moves toward regions of slightly lower gravitational potential, spreading until forces balance, and once balanced, it remains in that state until conditions change. This process unfolds slowly, over hours rather than moments, with changes barely noticeable from 1 minute to the next and becoming clear only over longer periods of time. This gradual nature is important because it means tides do not demand attention or require monitoring. They continue whether or not anyone observes them. For coastal ecosystems, tides shape long-term conditions, influencing where organisms can live and affecting nutrient movement and temperature distribution, with these effects emerging over time through repetition rather than intensity. The same tidal patterns have been occurring for millions of years, long before human observation or measurement. And today, tides are among the most predictable natural phenomena on Earth, with timing that can be calculated far in advance, and behavior that follows well-understood physical principles. There is no uncertainty about why tides occur, as they are not caused by chance or triggered by events, but are the steady outcome of gravity acting on a rotating planet with moving water. As the night continues, this slow redistribution of water is happening somewhere along the world's coastlines, quietly and gradually, with no sound accompanying it at sea and no signal announcing the change, unfolding beneath the surface, guided by forces that do not hurry. Because it follows such a stable pattern, it becomes easy for the mind to let go, knowing that nothing sudden is taking place and nothing needs to be anticipated as the process continues on its own. Beyond the daily rise and fall of tides, the ocean follows rhythms that unfold over much longer periods of time. Rhythms without sharp boundaries or clear beginnings and endings that can be felt in a single moment, emerging instead through repetition. Each tidal cycle leaves behind a slightly altered distribution of water, temperature, and motion. And while these changes are small on their own, they accumulate gradually over time. The ocean does not store memory in the way living systems do, nor does it anticipate what comes next. Yet its behavior reflects the ongoing balance of forces acting upon it. Currents form where tidal motion interacts with the shape of coastlines and the contours of the sea floor, with some persisting for long periods, guided by Earth's rotation and the geometry of ocean basins, while others shift slowly in response to seasonal changes and long-term patterns. These movements are not reactions, but outcomes, as water follows paths of least resistance, adjusting continuously as conditions change. In this way, the ocean behaves as a system shaped by constraints rather than instructions, with gravity, rotation, and the distribution of land defining the range of motion available to the water. Within that range, movement remains steady, and over years and decades, these patterns influence climate by transporting heat from one region to another and moderating temperature extremes, not through sudden decisions, but through continuity, as change arrives gradually rather than all at once. The same tides that lift and lower water along coastlines also contribute over time to the mixing of ocean layers, affecting how energy moves through the system in a process that unfolds quietly beneath the surface. On a human timescale, much of this motion feels static, as the ocean appears unchanged from day to day. Yet when measured carefully, its rhythms are always present. The predictability of these rhythms is one reason scientists can model ocean behavior with confidence, as the governing forces do not vary without cause and respond to well-defined inputs. When those inputs remain stable, the resulting patterns remain stable as well. This reliability allows long-term observation without urgency, with no need to watch closely or intervene, because the system does not drift toward disorder on its own and maintains structure through balance. For the mind, listening to descriptions of such systems can feel grounding, not because they are dramatic, but because they are consistent. And consistency reduces the need for vigilance. There is nothing sudden to prepare for, and nothing unexpected to resolve. And as the ocean continues its slow motion, the details become less important, leaving a sense of duration, of time passing without disruption, of processes unfolding without haste. You don't need to follow the specifics of these movements or visualize currents and coastlines. It's enough to recognize that these rhythms exist, steady and ongoing, independent of observation. They do not require awareness to continue and move forward, whether or not they are noticed. And as this understanding settles, attention can soften further, with the science remaining present but no longer needing to be examined, becoming part of the background. By now, there is no need to keep track of what has already been said, as nothing here depends on remembering details or building toward a conclusion, and the patterns described continue whether or not they are followed. The moon remains in motion, gravity continues acting evenly, and the ocean keeps adjusting slowly and without pause, with these processes neither speeding up nor requiring attention, and remaining unaffected by observation. The repetition is intentional, because repetition allows the mind to let go of effort, and when information stops changing, the brain no longer needs to stay alert, allowing awareness to remain open without monitoring. This is often the point where awareness becomes less defined, with words still being heard but no longer needing interpretation, passing through without forming clear images or thoughts. The body remains supported, and breathing continues at its own pace, with nothing shifting suddenly and the environment unchanged, offering no signal that something new is about to happen. The same ideas return gently, not to reinforce meaning, but to maintain rhythm. As gravity remains present and unchanged, the moon continues its path without pausing, and the ocean responds in the same gradual way. These facts do not require further explanation and remain true whether or not they are considered. This is a point of permission. Permission to stop listening closely, to stop following sentences, and to let the voice become part of the background. There is no advantage in staying awake for what comes next, as the science does not become more complex, the pace does not increase, and everything continues as it has been. If sleep arrives now, nothing is missed, because the processes being described do not move toward an ending, but repeat and continue. If awareness fades, it does so naturally, and if it returns briefly later, it can drift again just as easily. There is no correct way to experience this moment, as some nights' rest arrives quickly, and other nights it arrives in stages, both of which are normal. The body does not need instruction, and the mind does not need reassurance, because the steady rhythm is enough. The voice remains consistent, and the tone does not change, with nothing to prepare for. From here on, the information density remains low, with no new ideas introduced, and the story no longer progresses forward in the way stories usually do, simply staying as it is. And in that steadiness, sleep has room to settle quietly, without effort, and without needing to be noticed at all. Over very long periods of time, even stable systems change, not quickly or in ways that can be felt from one night to the next, but gradually, through small adjustments that accumulate over millions of years. The relationship between Earth and the Moon is one of these systems, and as the Moon orbits Earth, gravitational interactions continue to exchange energy between the two bodies in a way that is subtle but constant. One result of this ongoing interaction is that the Moon is slowly moving farther away from Earth, a change that is extremely small on a human timescale, only a few centimeters per year, and one that does not alter the Moon's appearance from one generation to the next or affect the familiar rhythm of nights and phases. Even so, when measured carefully, this movement is real. At the same time, Earth's rotation is slowing very slightly, with days becoming longer, not in hours or minutes, but in tiny fractions of a second, spread across millions of years. In the distant past, a day on Earth was shorter than it is now, and the planet rotated more quickly. A change that did not happen suddenly, but unfolded gradually through the same steady gravitational interaction that continues today. These long-term adjustments are not signs of instability. They are part of how physical systems evolve when forces remain consistent over time. Nothing here is breaking down or accelerating out of control, and the system as a whole remains balanced. Scientists understand these changes through observation and measurement, comparing present conditions with geological records, lunar samples, and precise tracking data. And the conclusions they draw are not speculative, but supported by multiple independent lines of evidence. Even so, these changes are so slow that they do not affect daily life, interrupt sleep, or alter the night sky in any noticeable way. From the perspective of a single evening, the Earth-Moon system appears fixed, with the moon rising and setting as expected, tides following their familiar patterns, and gravity behaving as it always has. This contrast between human time and cosmic time is important, as some processes unfold quickly enough to be noticed, while others move so slowly that they can only be understood through careful measurement, even though both types of processes follow the same physical laws, differing only in scale. When listening to descriptions of such long-term change, the mind does not need to imagine distant futures or ancient pasts. It's enough to recognize that stability does not require stillness, and that movement can be slow and continuous at the same time. The system does not rush toward an outcome or aim for a conclusion. It simply adjusts, maintaining balance as conditions shift. As the night continues, these long-term processes remain far beyond immediate awareness, pressing in on nothing and demanding no attention, unfolding quietly whether or not they are ever thought about. And because of that, they offer no reason to stay alert, belonging instead to timescales where urgency does not exist. Nothing in this system has changed. As the moon continues along its path, gravity remains constant, and the ocean responds in the same gradual way it always has, with no shift in direction, no increase in pace, and no moment that requires attention. These patterns feel familiar because they repeat, and repetition creates stability, allowing the body to rest without effort, while the same forces remain at work, neither strengthening nor weakening from one moment to the next, but staying evenly distributed, steady, and predictable. The night continues quietly. Breathing continues without instruction, and the body remains supported, with nothing needing to be held in place. If thoughts appear, they do not need to be examined and can pass without being followed. And if awareness drifts away, it does not need to return. The voice remains consistent, its role unchanged, offering no new information to process and nothing to remember, as the story does not move forward, but simply maintains the same rhythm. This is often where listening becomes effortless, where words lose their edges and meaning softens into tone, where nothing important is happening, and that is enough. The moon does not respond to being noticed, gravity does not react to attention, and the ocean does not adjust to observation. They continue because they are already in motion, and the same is true here. The night does not ask for participation. It allows rest, and there is no need to follow this any further, because the steady repetition is sufficient, and everything that matters is already in place. The rhythm continues without shift or resolution, with the same steady patterns remaining in place as the moon moves far beyond awareness. Gravity remains unchanged, and the ocean keeps adjusting slowly and without interruption. There is no signal marking the passage of time, and no clear boundary between moments, as the voice stays present without asking to be followed, words arriving and then fading, sentences not needing completion, and the space between them being enough. Breathing continues on its own without needing to be noticed. The body stays supported, and nothing needs to be held or corrected. If sleep has already arrived, the story continues without needing to be heard, and if awareness returns briefly, it can drift again just as easily. Nothing here depends on attention, as the processes being described do not change when they are not observed, do not slow down or speed up, and continue at the same pace they always have. There is no conclusion waiting, and no final thought to reach, as the night does not move toward an ending, but simply unfolds, with repetition remaining gentle, and the tone remaining even. There is no reason to stay awake for what comes next, because the words are no longer carrying information, only rhythm. And that rhythm does not need to be understood. It can exist quietly in the background, like distant motion, like slow cycles that do not announce themselves. Nothing more is required. As the night continues, the motion continues, and the quiet remains.